The Galactic Military Academy of Velorath had been built into a rock face as a statement of institutional permanence. Its training grounds were cut from flat gray stone and laid out in precise geometric formations that communicated without ambiguity that everything here was serious and nothing here was for the soft. Rachael had been here for 6 weeks and had not yet been soft about anything. She stood on the parade ground at 0600 in a standard issue cadet uniform, gray with a single blue stripe down the left sleeve, and she was smiling. Not the careful smile of someone reading the room, the wide, slightly too comfortable smile of someone who had decided 6 weeks ago that this was going to be fun and had not yet been given a single reason to change that assessment. At the front of the formation, Instructor Zard the Vixor stood with the complete stillness of someone who had supervised morning formations for 22 years and had organized his entire nervous system around it. He was 5.9 feet of olive green scales and economical movement, his thin tail resting flat behind him, his back crest running along his spine like an architectural detail. His face held the expression of a being who had seen every possible kind of cadet mistake and had stopped being surprised by any of them. His tongue flicked once, briefly, toward the eastern end of the formation. For those who knew him, that was a warning. Suleth the Reddorn arrived at 0601. He was 8 feet tall, deep red skin that looked heated from within rather than painted on the surface, and 2 forward-swept horns rising from his skull in arcs of red-black that gleamed like they had been polished specifically for the occasion of being attached to Suleth's head. His shoulder ridges sat broad above a frame of muscle that the Academy's equipment had needed to be recalibrated for twice. His tail moved behind him with slow and unself-conscious authority. He took his position in the formation with the attitude of a being who had never once in his life not been the most physically significant thing in a room. His dark eyes moved across the assembled cadets in the methodical way of someone doing an inventory and stopped on Rachael. She was still smiling. Suleth stepped sideways during the dismissal transition, positioning himself 2 feet from Rachael with the casual geometry of someone who had planned the angle. His horns cast a small shadow across her face in the morning light, which may or may not have been intentional, but was certainly accurate. "You're the human," he said, not a question. "I am," Rachael said. "You shouldn't be here." He delivered this without particular heat, in the tone of someone stating a geological fact about a region they had studied and found wanting. "Humans are not built for this program. Your bone density is insufficient. Your muscle-to-frame ratio is below the Academy's design parameters. Your species has been in interstellar space for less than 200 years. This Academy was founded 3,000 years before your planet developed basic metallurgy." "Okay," Rachael said. Suleth continued, undeterred. "The physical assessment cycle this week includes the sprint trial, the load-bearing endurance station, and the tactical agility sequence. Based on published species average performance data, you will not complete any of these within the qualifying range." "Okay," Rachael said again. The second okay had not landed the way Suleth anticipated. He had prepared for argument, for deflection, for the kind of defensive reasoning that admitted the point while trying to reframe it. He had not prepared for okay delivered with the energy of someone acknowledging a weather forecast they were not particularly worried about. I intend to raise a formal assessment concern with Instructor Zard regarding the placement of this intake's human cadets in the standard program track. Are you going to bet on it? Rachael asked. Suleth stopped. On me not finishing in qualifying range, Rachael said. You have a lot of specific data. I'm asking if you want to back it. If I complete all 3 assessments within qualifying range, you drop the formal concern. If I don't, you file it, and I'll countersign it myself. The offer was clean, specific, and made in full view of enough witnesses that it couldn't be walked back by either party. Several nearby cadets became very still. Zard, at the front of the dispersed formation, had not moved. His tail had, very slightly, lifted. Agreed, Suleth said. Rachael smiled in the same way she had been smiling since 0600. Zard's tail returned to flat. The 800-meter sprint trial was held at 1400 on the Academy's primary assessment track. Rachael's qualifying benchmark was 3 minutes, 14 seconds. Suleth's was 4 minutes, 2 seconds, adjusted for the significantly greater mass being moved across the same distance. They lined up at the start line with 8 other cadets, and Zard stood at the side with a timing instrument and the expression of someone who had watched this assessment cycle 140 times and expected nothing new today. The start signal fired. Suleth moved off the line with the rolling acceleration of something built to cover ground, his stride length consuming distance that required 2 of Rachael's strides to match. By 50 meters, he was visibly ahead of the field, and several watching cadets made the quiet sounds of beings watching something go approximately as predicted. Rachael was in the middle of the pack. She didn't look impressive. Her stride was not long, not architecturally dramatic. It had the quality of a machine set to a specific task and not informed that it was supposed to look like it was working hard. By the 200-meter mark, she was third. By 310 meters, she had passed the lead cadet. She completed the first lap in 1 minute, 29 seconds. Zard's tongue flicked. Once. Suleth turned at the 400-meter mark and saw Rachael approximately 12 meters behind him, running with the same mechanical efficiency she had been running with since the start, and his shoulder ridges shifted with the slight adjustment of someone updating a calculation mid-problem. He increased his pace. She increased hers. At the 750-meter mark, his lead was 2 meters. Her stride had not changed. It was the same compact, unremarkable stride applied without drama to the problem of distance, and the distance was nearly gone. Suleth hit the finish line first. His time, 3 minutes, 58 seconds, 4 seconds inside his qualifying benchmark. Rachael hit the finish line 0.3 seconds later. Her time, 2 minutes, 59 seconds, 15 seconds inside her qualifying benchmark. There was a silence on the track with a specific texture, the kind that forms when a collection of beings has processed information that doesn't fit in the space they have prepared for it. Zard looked at his timing instrument for a moment longer than technically necessary, then entered the result with 2 taps of his stylus. Suleth stood at the finish line, his skin holding a flat evenness that hadn't been there before, like something had been applied to the surface to prevent what was underneath from showing. He looked at the time board for 4 seconds. "Wind correction," he said. "There's no wind," Zard said, without looking up. "The strength trial. That's the relevant one." Zard's tongue flicked. He made no other comment. The strength station occupied a low building at the eastern end of the Academy grounds with reinforced walls and ceiling mounts, adjusted for species height. The equipment inside had been calibrated for 29 species over 3,000 years and held in its maintenance log a longer record of structural failure than any other building on campus. Zard had rechecked calibration at 0800. Readings were accurate. The Reddorn standard resistance plates were loaded at prescribed weight. 840 kilograms on the primary press, 620 on the overhead pull, 510 on the lateral load bar. He had stood in the empty building afterward with his tail flat and his tongue performing one slow flick, and then walked out, having written nothing in his log because there was nothing to write. Rachael arrived at 08:58, walked through the entrance looking at the equipment the way someone considers furniture they're thinking of rearranging, and asked Zard what the qualifying weight for human calibration was on the primary press. 96 kilograms, Zard said. Rachael looked at the 840-kilogram Reddorn plate stack. She looked at Zard. "What's the qualifying weight on Reddorn calibration?" "That information," Zard said, "is not relevant to your assessment." Rachael smiled in the way she had been smiling since 0600 the previous morning. Suleth arrived at 0900 exactly and took in the room in approximately 1.2 seconds. "Human calibration," he said. "The assessment is open calibration," Zard said, consulting his tablet with the economy of a being reading a policy he had not written and was not responsible for. "Cadets select calibration based on personal performance target. There is no minimum calibration requirement." Suleth was quiet for 2 seconds. "She will injure herself. That is a medical concern, not an assessment concern. The station medic is present." Zard indicated a door at the south wall, through which a Quellic medic named Sorn was sitting at a small desk, reading something, and not particularly concerned. Rachael walked to the Reddorn calibration setup, adjusted the seat height to its lowest setting, which still left her feet not quite flat on the floor, sat down, gripped the bar, and pressed. The bar moved, slowly, with visible effort, with the fine, determined tremor in her arms at the last quarter of the range that suggested serious persuasion was being applied to the laws of physics. But it completed the full range of motion and returned to the rack with a sound the equipment log would later record as within standard parameters. Suleth's mouth opened by approximately 3 millimeters, which for a Reddorn was the structural equivalent of a loud noise. The overhead pull produced the same result, a small, efficient jump to grip the bar, 4 reps finding a rhythm that had no right to exist given the weight involved, feet swinging gently 12 inches above the floor. By the lateral load bar, where Rachael braced and pushed for a sustained 12-second effort, the sensor display climbed past the human qualifying threshold at 4 seconds and kept climbing. At 8 seconds, it crossed a secondary threshold line that Zard had never seen crossed by a first-year cadet of any species. and his tongue performed a single involuntary flick loud enough in the silence of the station to be audible. At 12 seconds, the sensor locked the reading. Suleth stood 2 meters from the station, with his arms at his sides and his tail completely still, which for a Reddorn was the physical equivalent of a system shutdown. The mottled texture that had begun in his neck after the sprint trial had returned and spread. A slow dark flush was surfacing, not dramatic, not sudden, but unmistakable. A deepening of the red, a bruising quality moving upward, the color of something that had been contained for too long. His horns, which he had no control over, and which therefore told the truth even when the rest of him was trying not to, had angled forward by approximately 8 degrees. The agility sequence, he said. His voice was level. He had kept it level by doing something significant with his respiratory system. The strength trial is complete, Zard said. The agility sequence is tomorrow. 1400. He tapped his tablet once. The concern remains open pending the 3rd trial. The tactical agility sequence did not produce the clean result the first 2 trials had. Rachael finished it within her qualifying benchmark. She finished it 3rd overall, behind a Velorath cadet and by 0.8 seconds behind Suleth. His time was faster. His result, in absolute numbers, was better than hers. This was not the complicated part. The complicated part was the composite. Taken across all 3 trials and entered into the Academy's assessment system, Rachael's performance produced a cross-species index score that sat above Suleth's composite by 11 points. The system weighted results against species average, training duration, and calibration selection, and the combination of Reddorn calibration on the strength trials with 6 weeks of Academy training rather than the standard 3 years of pre-enrollment conditioning had produced an index number the algorithm flagged with a yellow border. Yellow border meant result is accurate but requires context note for records. Zard wrote the context note. It took him 4 sentences. He submitted the composite results to the assessment office at 1600. At 1830, he received a query from the Admission Standards Committee, which he had never, in 22 years, heard from outside its scheduled reporting cycle, asking him to confirm the calibration selection record. He confirmed it. They asked him to confirm the training duration variable. He confirmed that too. The committee did not respond again that evening. 3 days later, a revised addendum to the Physical Assessment Intake Standards was circulated to all active instructors. It contained 4 new paragraphs in a section previously titled Calibration Selection Guidelines, now including a subsection called Cross-Calibration Performance Documentation Protocol. The protocol established a review threshold, a specific composite index number, above which results would be automatically referred to the Standards Committee for record classification. The threshold number was 11 points below Rachael's score. Suleth read the revised standards document. He read it a second time. He set it down and sat looking at the wall for a duration he did not subsequently record anywhere. His neck retained a faint mottled quality for the rest of that week, visible in certain lights, which several cadets noticed and none of them mentioned. Zard received the document, read it once, filed it, and added a single line to his incident log. Admissions standards updated. Human cadet Rachael, all 3 trials qualifying. Formal concern closed. No further action required. He paused, then added, calibration selection. Her own choice. Equipment performed within parameters throughout. His tail was flat. He did not flick his tongue. He almost did. Rachael received the document, read it, set it on her desk next to her word puzzle book, looked at it for a moment, then picked up the book and continued the puzzle she had started 3 days ago. It was a difficult one. She was enjoying it. Outside, the Academy's stone training grounds extended to the rock face in the precise geometric formations that communicated without ambiguity that everything here was serious and nothing here was for the soft. Rachael turned the page. She was still smiling,